The young guitar teacher was demonstrating Crazy Train to a small crowd at the music store. See, most people play this wrong. Let me show you how Randy Rhoads actually played it. The older customer in the back, wearing a baseball cap, listened quietly. He knew exactly how Randy Rhoads played it. He'd been standing next to him in the studio when it was recorded. It was a Saturday afternoon in July 2018 at a guitar center in Burbank, California. Jake Morgan, a 28-year-old guitar instructor, was giving his weekly free demonstration to attract students. He was good at it, confident, skilled, knowledgeable. Today's demonstration was on classic metal riffs, and Jake had drawn maybe 15 people. He was in his element, showing techniques, explaining theory, establishing himself as the expert. "All right," Jake said, adjusting his Stratocaster. "Let's talk about one of the most iconic riffs in metal history, Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. Specifically, Randy Rhoads' guitar work on this track. He played the opening riff, his fingers moving confidently across the fretboard. It sounded good, not perfect, but good enough for a music store demonstration. Now, here's the thing most people don't know," Jake continued, his voice taking on the slightly condescending tone of someone who's about to share insider knowledge. "Most guitarists play this riff wrong. They think it's simple, just straight power chords. But Randy Rhoads was classically trained. He brought a sophistication to metal that most people miss." In the back of the small crowd, partially hidden behind a taller customer, stood a man in his late 60s. He wore a black baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses, and a plain t-shirt. He'd wandered in to browse, saw the demonstration, and stopped to listen. Nobody paid him much attention. Jake played the riff again, this time with slightly different fingering. "See this? This is how Randy actually played it. He used this particular fingering because it allowed him to transition smoothly into the next section. Most tab books get this wrong." The man in the back shifted slightly, but said nothing. "I've studied Randy Rhoads for years," Jake said, his confidence growing with his audience's attention. "He's my biggest influence. I've transcribed all his solos, studied his classical training, even visited his gravesite. The man was a genius, and it's my mission to make sure people understand his techniques correctly." Jake launched into the solo section, playing it with technical proficiency but not quite capturing the raw energy of the original. When he finished, several people applauded. "That's how Randy Rhoads played Crazy Train," Jake announced. "Not the simplified version you find in most tutorials, the real thing." From the back, a quiet voice spoke up. "Actually, I think he played it a little differently." Jake looked toward the voice. The older guy in the baseball cap had raised his hand slightly. "Oh yeah?" Jake said, trying to keep his tone friendly but clearly a bit annoyed at being contradicted. "How do you think he played it?" "The fingering in the main riff. He used his index and ring finger for those power chords, not his index and pinky like you're doing. And the transition to the solo, he approached it from a different position on the neck." Jake felt his authority being challenged in front of his potential students. "Sir, with all due respect, I've studied Randy Rhoads for 10 years. I've analyzed every recording, every live performance. I think I know how he played it." The man in the back seemed to consider this. "You might be right. It's been a while." "It's not just about playing the notes," Jake continued, sensing he needed to reestablish his expertise. "It's about understanding Randy's background, his influences, his relationship with Ozzy. That context is what separates someone who plays the song from someone who truly understands it." "That's a good point," the man said quietly. Emboldened, Jake went on. "Randy Rhoads transformed Ozzy's sound. Before Randy, Ozzy was just the former Black Sabbath singer. Randy made him a solo artist. That relationship, that creative partnership, you have to understand it to truly play this music correctly." "I'd say that's pretty accurate," the man agreed. One of the younger guitarists in the crowd spoke up. "Can you show us the solo breakdown, like note by note?" Jake smiled. This was his specialty. "Absolutely. Now, this solo is interesting because Randy combines classical techniques with metal aggression. Let me break it down for you." He started playing through the solo slowly, explaining each phrase. He was genuinely knowledgeable, and his playing was solid, but there were subtle differences from the original recording. Small variations in the vibrato, slightly different note choices in a few places. The man in the back listened carefully, occasionally nodding, occasionally looking like he might say something, but then thinking better of it. After Jake finished the demonstration, the crowd started to disperse. A few people approached to ask about lessons. Jake was scheduling an appointment with a teenager when the man in the baseball cap walked up to the counter where Jake had set down his guitar. "That was really good," the man said. "You're clearly passionate about Randy's work." "Thanks," Jake said, pleased but still a bit defensive from the earlier critique. "Like I said, I've dedicated a lot of time to studying him." "I could tell. Can I ask you something? Do you have a guitar I could try for a minute?" Jake hesitated, then grabbed one of the display models off the wall. A Les Paul, the same type Randy had played. "Sure. You play?" "A little," the man said, taking the guitar. He sat down on one of the stools, adjusted the strap, and without any warm-up, launched into Crazy Train. But this wasn't Jake's version. This was different. The fingering was exactly as the man had described. Index and ring finger for the power chords. The transition was smoother. The subtle nuances that Jake had missed were all there. And the solo, when he hit the solo, it wasn't just technically correct. It had feeling, energy, the exact phrasing and vibrato from the original recording. Because it was the original. This wasn't someone who'd studied the song. This was someone who knew the song from the inside. Jake stood there, his scheduling forgotten, watching this older guy in a baseball cap play Crazy Train more authentically than Jake ever had. When the man finished, he looked up at Jake. The thing about Randy is, he never overthought it. He felt it. That's what made him special. "Who are you?" Jake asked quietly. The man pulled off his sunglasses. The face was older, more lined, but unmistakable to anyone who'd spent 10 years studying Randy Rhoads and Ozzy Osbourne. "I'm Ozzy," he said simply, "and I wrote that song. With Randy. In my living room, in 1980. Jake felt all the blood drain from his face. For 10 years, he'd studied Randy Rhoads. He'd made Randy Rhoads his entire identity as a guitarist. He had Randy Rhoads tattoos, and he'd just spent 20 minutes confidently lecturing Ozzy Osbourne about how Randy Rhoads played. "Oh my God," Jake managed. "I was telling you, I said I knew better than—" Ozzy laughed, a genuine warm laugh. "Don't worry about it. You're good, really good. You just had a couple things slightly off." "I can't believe Jake couldn't form complete sentences. "You were standing there, and I was acting like I was the expert, and you literally wrote the song." "Hey," Ozzy said, his voice kind. "You obviously love Randy's work. That matters more than getting every detail right. But since I'm here, you want me to show you a few things? The way Randy actually played it?" Jake nodded, too mortified to speak. For the next 45 minutes, Ozzy Osbourne gave Jake Morgan a private guitar lesson in the middle of Guitar Center. He showed him the exact fingering Randy had used, explained why Randy had made certain choices, told stories about the recording sessions for Blizzard of Oz. "Randy and I used to work on these songs for hours," Ozzy said at one point. "He'd try something, I'd try something, we'd argue about it, laugh about it. That's what made it work. It wasn't just technical perfection. It was two people creating something together." Other customers had gathered, recognizing Ozzy now that his sunglasses were off. But Ozzy stayed focused on Jake, making sure he understood each technique. "The solo here," Ozzy explained. "Randy played this phrase 3 different ways in 3 different takes. We ended up using the second take because it had the most emotion. Not the most technical, the most emotional. That's what you should be teaching your students. Emotion matters more than perfect technique." Jake was frantically trying to remember everything, taking mental notes of every story, every technical detail. This was better than 10 years of study. This was learning from the source. Finally, Ozzy looked at his watch. "I should get going. Sharon's going to wonder where I disappeared to." "Thank you," Jake said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. I've spent 10 years thinking I knew everything about Randy's playing, and you just showed me I knew maybe half of it." "You knew more than half," Ozzy corrected. "You had the passion right. You just needed a few technical corrections. Keep teaching, keep sharing Randy's music. That's important. Just maybe don't tell people you know exactly how he played it unless you were actually there." He smiled to show he was kidding. Could I take a photo?" Jake asked. "Nobody's going to believe this happened." "Course you can," Ozzy said. They took several photos, Jake looking simultaneously mortified and ecstatic, Ozzy looking amused and friendly. Then, as Ozzy was leaving, he turned back. "One more thing. Randy would have liked you. He loved meeting young guitarists who were serious about learning. He'd have been happy to know people are still studying his work 37 years after he died. So don't be embarrassed about today. Be proud that you care enough to study. Just stay humble enough to keep learning." After Ozzy left, Jake sat down, still processing what had just happened. His manager came over, having watched the whole thing. "That was Ozzy Osbourne," the manager said unnecessarily. "I know," Jake replied. "You lectured Ozzy Osbourne about how to play Ozzy Osbourne songs." "I know. And then he gave you a guitar lesson." "I know." Jake posted the photos that night with a caption. "Today I learned about humility. I thought I was a Randy Rhoads expert. Then Ozzy Osbourne walked into my demonstration and showed me I still have a lot to learn. Never stop being a student." The post went viral. Music sites picked it up. Jake's teaching schedule exploded. Everyone wanted lessons from the guy who got a guitar lesson from Ozzy. But more importantly, Jake's entire approach to teaching changed. He stopped presenting himself as the ultimate authority. Instead, he positioned himself as a fellow student, someone who was learning alongside his students. He told the Ozzy story to every new class, not as a funny anecdote, but as a genuine lesson in humility. "I spent 10 years studying Randy Rhoads," he'd say. 10 years, and in 45 minutes, Ozzy taught me more than I'd learned in all that time. Not because my studying was wrong, but because studying can only take you so far. Experience, being there, living it, that's a different kind of knowledge. And recognizing what you don't know is more important than pretending you know everything. 3 months after the incident, Jake received a package. Inside was a guitar pick and a note in Ozzy's handwriting. "For the guy who loves Randy as much as I did, keep teaching, keep learning. Ozzy." The pick was one of Randy's original picks from the Blizzard of Oz tour. Jake had it framed, and it hangs in his teaching studio with a plaque. Humility is the most important technique. A year later, when Ozzy's tour came through Los Angeles, Jake received an email from Ozzy's management. "Ozzy remembered you and wanted to invite you backstage. He said something about finishing that guitar lesson." Backstage, Ozzy greeted Jake warmly. "The guy from Guitar Center. Sharon, this is the kid I told you about, lectured me about Randy Rhoads." Sharon laughed. "Oh, you're the one. Ozzy's been telling that story for months." They sat and talked for an hour. Ozzy introduced Jake to his current guitarist, who'd also heard the story. They traded guitar techniques, shared stories about Randy, and Ozzy made sure Jake understood something important. You being passionate about Randy's music, teaching it to new generations, that matters. Randy didn't get to have a long career. He died at 25. But his music lives on because people like you keep it alive. Don't ever feel bad about that day at Guitar Center. That was you showing how much you care. That's beautiful. Today, Jake Morgan is one of the most sought-after guitar instructors in Los Angeles. His waiting list is 6 months long, and every single student on their first day hears the story of the day he tried to teach Ozzy Osbourne how Randy Rhoads played Crazy Train. "The moral isn't that I'm an idiot," Jake tells them. "The moral is that expertise isn't just about knowledge, it's about humility, openness to correction, and recognizing that there's always someone who knows more than you, even if, especially if, they're wearing a baseball cap in the back of your demonstration." The Randy Rhoads pick from Ozzy still hangs on his studio wall. Students ask about it all the time. Jake tells them the whole story, never leaving out the embarrassing parts, always ending with the lesson Ozzy taught him. Emotion matters more than perfect technique, and humility matters more than expertise. If this story about humility, learning, and the importance of staying open to correction made you smile, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with any teacher or expert who needs to remember that there's always more to learn. Have you ever been corrected by someone who actually lived what you were studying? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more wholesome stories about music legends and the people they inspire.